Good morning, almost afternoon. Thank you guys for coming today. We came from down south, so we had a little bit of a ways to go, but we're happy to be here. We've already been to an excellent session this morning and got some great resources, and so we're hoping to provide you all with some great resources too. So we're going to be talking about today about what things need to be in place for inclusion to work, and we're going to go through what we've done in our own district, and you can take some ideas. If you have other ideas to share, that'd be great. We would love to hear it. Also, if you have questions that come up, you guys can use the Edmodo site, or you can use, we have a Twitter account. I'll show you that real quickly. You can access us via email, or if you want to write it down on a Post-it, that's fine too, and give it to us, and we'll get back to you. And we'll leave some time at the end to go over questions as well. I'll come back to this slide so that you can write that information down. Okay, so just some background on Tustin Unified. We started to go to a more inclusive environment in our general education classes last year. What we did is instead of having our preschoolers go into like a K1 SDC class, instead they went into the general education class. Not the ones that would qualify to go to a mild severe setting, but the ones that would typically go into a mild moderate setting instead went into the general education environment with support from the RSP teacher. And we just did this in our transitional kinder and kindergarten classrooms last year. This year that moved on up to first grade classrooms too, because those kids moved up like the other general education students would. We wanted to do this slowly because if we did it all at once, it'd be very overwhelming for everybody in the district. So we kind of wanted to start out slowly and kind of work things out and make sure that we were able to address the needs and concerns of all the stakeholders involved. And so that's just the background on where we're at with inclusion in Tustin Unified. So the goals of this workshop we have right here, we're really just hoping that you can take something and implement it when you get back to work on Monday. I always like going to workshops and having something that I can take immediately and implement. Even if it's a simple thing, it's always nice to be able to have something new to try. But overall, we just want you to have some good ideas that you could take back and share with your colleagues. So here's the housekeeping slide again. So once again, if you have questions, there's multiple ways to get them answered. So for an inclusive service delivery model to be successful, schools need to provide adequate support and services for students, well-designed individual education programs, professional development for all teachers, time for teachers to plan, reduced class size, collaboration between parents, teachers, and administrators, and sufficient funding. So that was from an article by Posnick and Goodwin. So what I want you to do right now, because you're all at little table groups, if you're not, you can turn and share with maybe somebody that's close by. Go ahead and just share out what you think the most vital components are that are listed here. There's a few of them listed right there, but just talk about what you think are the most vital components. I'll give you about 30 seconds to do that. Okay, so go ahead and just share out real quickly. What were some of the major ones that came up? Time, did time come up? Time's a huge one, right? Okay. What other ones did you guys think were major?
Professional development.
PD, it's huge.
Admin support. I mean, we were kind of the rebel group. All of this is our excuses not to do it. If you believe in it, you'll figure all this out. But these are the reasons that people will put forward. And it's not that they aren't barriers, but sometimes they're used as reasons why we don't.
That's very true. Okay, so going on, I'm going to have you access actually one of the handouts that we gave you. So this is handout number 2. You guys should have these on your table unless you printed it out ahead of time. So like I said, we really want you guys to be able to take something with you today. So what we want you to do is go ahead and just write down a few PD opportunities and supports or resources that you've already implemented, whether it be something that you've done just in your own classroom, your school, or your district. Just go ahead and write those down right now. You're just going to be filling out one side right now. Okay, so we're going to come back to this handout at the end so you could take it with you and hopefully gain something from this today. So when you're considering what type of PD or support that you're going to provide, you want to make sure you're considering all three of the following. Who are the stakeholders and who needs the support? Because that's key to knowing how you're going to provide that. You also need to know what areas they need the support. Sometimes you think that they need support in one area, then they think they need support in another area. So finding a balance between the two. You could use things like SurveyMonkey. Our district uses a lot of online tools. We have something called Haiku. It's a website format that the whole district uses, and you could do surveys on there too. Google Docs or Google Forms are great ways to do that as well. You also want to be able to provide different formats of support, because not one format works for everybody. Attending a PD can be kind of difficult for teachers, so how do you get information to them? So you need to consider all those different aspects of PD for your district. So on the other handout that you have, and these are the only handouts we're going to have you guys fill out today, we want you just to write down who are the stakeholders. This is on this one. It's at your table. It could be anything like parents, teachers. So you could put a separate one for each box. It's always helpful sometimes to triage them, put who are your most important ones first. And so also, when you're considering your stakeholders, you want to think about the different learning styles. So some can read it and apply it. Some will be able to observe another teacher and apply it. And then some need to observe, apply on their own, and then receive feedback on it. So you want to be considering that when you're completing these documents and think about how you're going to provide the support. So for the next section, go ahead and write down the areas of concern that are specific to those stakeholders. So if you have someone down like just, you could put general education teachers, and then an area of concern, areas where support is needed, could be in accommodations and modifications. And then for the final column, what are the formats for disseminating information? Like I was saying earlier, it could be something different depending on who it is and how they can access the information. But you can consider on-site trainings or meetings, district PD, where they can go to a certain site to get the professional development, PLCs, professional learning communities. Newsletters are a good way to get just short bits of information out to people. Websites, Pinterest, Twitter, other forms of social media, just to share quick articles or resources. So if you're using all of these different formats, you can be sure that someone's going to access something and take something away from that type of PD. So you could write down some of these examples, or you could write down your own of how you could provide PD in your own district. So this is a planning document, and you can continue to fill it out as we go along. If you have other ideas that come up, you can also take it with you and use it as something to plan with your teams at your site. So how many of you guys are teachers? Okay, admin? Specialists? Okay, so good mix. So you all know that then it's helpful when you're able to plan with your team and to have some sort of document to keep track of what decisions you've made. So that's what we wanted to do, is just provide you with something to do that. So when we think about inclusive education, we need to think about the different areas of support that we're going to provide. And one of that is academic. So when we're providing academic supports, of course that's modifications and accommodations. But we also need to think about, okay, well, how are we going to train teachers, and who else is involved in this, like paraeducators, resource specialists, or special education teachers? How are we going to give them the training that they need too? So I'm going to go over just some different things that we have implemented within our own district, and some things that we're in the process of implementing as well. So this is just a quote that I thought was helpful. The key part in this quote is the reflective activities. I know it's so hard to find time to reflect on our practice right now with Common Core and everything else going on in the classroom, but we want to make sure that we're reflecting on how we're doing on implementing these different strategies with students. How is it going? And make sure that we're working with our teams to develop best practices and getting everybody's input as we move forward with decision making. Okay, so when we considered areas for PD for academic supports, we did a lot with Universal Design for Learning in our district, so we would send out different information to teachers on that. We had a training that some of our RSP teachers attended, and we also are going to do some other trainings this school year for general education teachers. And the key part of that is just knowing that this is designed to help all students be successful, not just special education students. And I think that's where inclusion it's really important to get that across to teachers, that it's not just about your students with special needs, it's about all the kids in the classroom having access to the curriculum. So if you can get that across to them, that's not something that they need to do that's extra, that it should just be embedded, and it's not just for that one kid, that's the key part of this. So that's where differentiated instruction comes in. And then we also provided some PD on different types of inclusion models and co-teaching formats. We're still in the process of working on that as we move up to the secondary levels. We provided PD on managing paraprofessionals, using technology to increase student engagement, disability awareness, occupational therapy strategies in the general education classroom. So I'll break these down in some further slides, but this is just a few examples of different PD that we have offered just to support all the different levels. So the supports that I'm going to talk about, like I said, right now are academic. Later on, Ashley's going to talk about the social emotional supports, and I'll go back and talk about environmental supports, because you know that those all need to be in place for inclusion to be successful. It's not just about the academics and the accommodations and modifications. But we want to make sure that we're providing supports in all of those areas, and PD for all teachers and paraprofessionals in all of those areas to make sure that everybody's on the same page. So I already said this, that it's important to remember that a major component of inclusion is differentiated instruction and meeting the needs of all students with and without disabilities. It's just good teaching in general. Here was another good quote. That was, in an inclusive classroom environment comprised of students of mixed abilities, differentiated instruction allows the teacher to meet the needs of every learner by providing students with multiple options for learning, allowing each student to make his or her own meaning from what is being taught, and enabling each student to individually express what he or she has learned. And I think right now with Common Core, it's the perfect time to really establish this. We've been doing Readers Workshop and Writers Workshop in our school district, and although it is a learning curve for teachers, once you see these in place in classrooms, you can see how everybody's benefiting from that format of instruction, because we have students that are reading books at their own level, but they're still conversing about the same skill. And that's really important. So I think with Common Core right now, we have an opportunity to really promote inclusive practices in the classroom and give our students with special needs the opportunity to prosper in the general education environment. So in order to address differentiated instruction, we actually hired a differentiation TOSA this year, a teacher on special assignment. And so what she is starting to do is she's doing consultation with assigned general education teachers. Consultation is a big thing in our district, so Ashley will talk about that too. And then the coach also works with different teachers during the school year on a continuous basis. And the format of coaching is to model lessons, observe lessons, and then plan lessons together, and then to go back and assess the effectiveness of those lessons. She also does PD with some of our other specialists in the district, because we have some that are like, we have a science and math TOSA, and then we also have a language arts TOSA, and we have digital learning coaches. So she also does PD with them, just so they understand that differentiated instruction is a component of all of that. Our RSPs, we actually started calling SAIs. Do you guys call them that up here? SAI, Specialized Academic Instructors. So the reason we switched that is because that's the service that they provide, Specialized Academic Instruction. And we're really trying to utilize our SAIs to be the go-to at their school sites. They are the local experts. They're the ones that can provide resources or strategies to the general education teachers and other paraprofessionals on site and anybody that's really on site on accommodations and modifications, on even behavior interventions. So we've really tried to train them and build capacity within them so that they can be that on-site expert. We've also worked with them on consultation and how they can go about being consultants at their school site, because that's another skill that they have to develop. And that's a key component of inclusion, is making sure that there's someone on site that understands the dynamic of the school, and so how best to address the needs within each of those classrooms. Because it's hard when you have consultants that come from outside the school that might not understand the culture of that school. So to have a local expert is key. We still have our other district specialists go in and consult with the teams there, but to have that person on site that everybody looks to is really important. Another thing that we've been doing, and I know a lot of people already do this, the vertical teaming. You'll see this a lot, especially when students transition from elementary to middle school, then from middle school to high school. But what we started doing is we wanted general education teachers to see what some of our special education classrooms look like and to see some of the things that they were implementing, just because they use a lot of strategies that could be used in a gen ed class to benefit all students, especially visuals, schedules being posted on the wall and referred to, just the way the environment is set up. That could really benefit all students. So we wanted teachers to be able to go into other classrooms and to see how those strategies are helping the students with special needs. But on the flip side of that, we also wanted special education teachers, especially our pre-K team, because they're the ones that are sending the students that are currently in an SDC program into the general education environment. We wanted them to see the general education environment. How can you make recommendations for a student without knowing what you're sending them into? So we've been having different meetings with them. We've set up observations so that they can go see other sites, and we've even had general education teachers go and visit sites where the inclusion model is going well at that site, so they'll go observe another general education teacher. So that planning and that time to observe is really important for them to develop their skills in that area. And then we also have students move up with care. We have care packages. So the IEP does provide an extensive amount of information, but for some teachers, general education teachers, it might be a little overwhelming. So we created a packet. Our pre-K coordinator, she got together with her staff and created a packet that listed different academic skills in it, but also just some different ideas for dealing with difficult behaviors that wouldn't be in a behavior plan, because we know that some students have behaviors that don't warrant a behavior plan. So those packets would move on up with the kids so that the teachers would have a better idea of their needs. We also implemented a summer jumpstart camp. And so in this camp, for our students that were going from the small SDC setting in the preschool and moving into the general education environment, it's quite different to go from a class of 13 to a class where the overlap has about 30 to 33 kids in it. So that during the summer, we overlapped with a general education program where the students came to our Jumpstart program for 3 hours each day, but for an hour of that, we overlapped with another program. So they were with general education peers for about an hour, and they would focus on more play skills and social skills just to give them exposure to the larger environment. And so we just did that this summer, and it actually went pretty well. And a lot of the students that were able to attend that program, you can see that they transferred the skills that they learned in that program into the general education environment that they started at the beginning of the school year. We didn't offer this past summer, but we had it the summer before. We had a summer institute where we had different people within our district, including, we had teams of general education teachers, special education teachers, and specialists like occupational therapists or behavior specialists present on these different components, and people could sign up to attend this during the summer. It was a 3-day workshop where we had sessions for 3 hours. So we offered 3 different sessions, and then we had them, I think, twice. So there was different opportunities for them to go. It was voluntary. We'd like to get it paid in the future so we can get more teachers there, but we still did get a good turnout last summer, and we're hopefully going to implement it again this summer. So another part is disability awareness. We wanted to make sure that not only our teachers understood disabilities, but that also students could understand that they had students in their classroom that might be different from them. So we provided our teachers with some lessons on informing students about different disabilities, and mainly it was just about the importance of kindness and being kind, because that's really the key thing. Also providing them a list of books and other types of resources that they could use to promote disability awareness within their own classroom. And we have access to that on our Haiku site, which is our website. It's an inclusive schooling website that has all those different materials that teachers can access. And so this one is key paraprofessional training and support. I know that we have a really hard time. Yes. It's the format that our district uses. It's the whole district uses it. So it's just a website, but Haiku is the company. I don't know if, I don't think I can get you guys access just because it's within our district, but you can actually go to their website and set up one on there. It would be the same as using like a Weebly or something like that, but it's a little bit more, has a little bit more on it. Yeah, definitely more comprehensive. So for paraprofessional training and support, it's really important for them to have direct training and support in all of these different areas. We can't expect them to just go into the classroom and to be able to work with a student without having any professional development. Last year, we did a series of trainings for them. I think we did 3 different trainings. One was on behavior, one was on academic types of supports, and the other one was just an overall paraeducator best practices type of training. And then we actually have another one that we're doing on this Friday on the 31st. We're going to do one session in the morning for paras that are in inclusive environments, and then one in the afternoon for those that work in special day classes, just because it's a little bit of a different skill set. Also providing them with ongoing feedback and working with teachers on how to manage paraprofessionals, because when you have general education teachers that aren't used to having paraprofessionals in their classroom, it's a learning curve for them because they need to learn how to manage adults and not just students. So we provide teachers with resources, and this is also on the website that the teachers have access to, a format for a schedule that they can give to their paraeducators, expectations of their classroom. So I had one that, I used to teach SDC, so I would give all my paraprofessionals expectations for my classroom because each teacher has different expectations and they have a different way that they run their classroom. And so just sharing with general education teachers that it's important for paraeducators to have that information. They need to know how they fit into that picture of the classroom. So we've been really working hard on building capacity within our general education teachers to provide that type of support for paraeducators, but then also with the RSP teachers too, in managing the paraprofessionals. So in addition to the other trainings, we offer monthly work groups. We call it an inclusive schooling work group. And it's more of a format for teachers to just show up at, whether they be the RSP teacher. We have some SDC teachers that even come, general education teachers, specialists come to these meetings. And we just talk about, okay, what's going well, what's not going well, where do we need to provide more support? And it's more informal, just to give teachers that, you know, that forum where they can share their concerns and it be not a training or some type of formal meeting that they have to attend. And we found that we've gotten a lot of ideas out of having these meetings monthly, and even like things like we'll provide a newsletter that just highlights points from the website when teachers don't have time to access the website. So we would take things from the website that would just be some key points that we wanted them to know about, whether it be some quick behavior strategies that they could use. So that idea came out of one of the work groups, but we've found these to be a pretty effective form of support. And then another key aspect is definitely that administrative support. We have district meetings. The superintendent, when we decided to go to this more inclusive model, met with all of the school sites. So we did probably about 3 different meetings to have, I think, like 10 school sites at each. And he just went over the goals of inclusion and told them that this is what we're doing and everybody's on board. So it wasn't something that was just coming from special ed, it was coming from the rest of the district too. So it was really important to have that message. And then we did another meeting at the end of this past school year to go over it with the first grade teachers that would be getting the students from the kindergarten classrooms. And we'll probably do another one this year just so the message is clear that inclusion is what we're really focused on. We also sat down and had like a little mini meetings with the site principals and consulted with them on who the students that they were getting were and what their needs would be and what teachers might be good fits for those students at the end of last school year. So then we placed the students appropriately, and we found that that was effective just to get feedback from the principals, because you want to know what type of setting you're going to be sending the student into and make sure that it's going to be a good fit. We also share articles on inclusion. That one of my favorite ones that our assistant superintendent shared was that special ed is a service, not a place. I don't know if you guys saw that. It came out probably, it was over a year ago. But we shared that with admin too. And so they've been bombarded with articles on inclusion. So hopefully they're getting some resources too. And then we've also been working on collaboration across departments. I meet with our other TOSAs and I meet with our curriculum department, I meet with our tech department, just so everybody understands where special ed's coming from, everybody's on the same page, because I don't know how it is in some of your guys' districts, but sometimes it feels like, or it is like, special ed's over here and general education's over here, when we all have great resources to share with one another, and everybody should be coming together and meeting and planning together at the district level, so then at the school site level, the same thing is happening. You can't expect teachers to implement and to collaborate with special education teachers if the special education staff is not collaborating with other district level employees. So that has to come down from the top, and we've really been focusing on that as well, just to really get the academic support in place for the students. So Ashley's gonna go ahead and talk about the social emotional supports and how we have put different things in place to address that.
Yes. How you guys doing? Good, good. So yes, like Andrea mentioned, I will be talking about the social emotional supports. So it is important to consider that when we're preparing our educators to work with students in an inclusive environment, that we not forget the social emotional supports that are necessary as well. So this may include training the staff in the areas of PBIS. We also have the proactive classroom strategies that we've been training in using Dr. Randy Sprick's CHAMPS model for classroom management. Also too, it's important to know who would be involved in these different supports. Who are we looking to help provide these services? So we have different people such as the psychologist at your school sites. Your school psychologist can be a great resource for your students and for your teachers as well. You also may have education intervention specialists like myself. I'll explain that role. You may call it something else in your district. Also, autism program managers are a great resource. And then we also have education-related mental health services specialists. Now that we do provide mental health within the school setting, we do have staff to support that as well. Do you all have any of the type of supports that I just mentioned in your settings? If you want to raise your hand. Yeah, what do you have? What kind of supports?
School psychologists, their staff, and MSWs.
So school psychologists, and what was the next one? Oh, social workers as well. That's a great resource too for the mental health component as well. What other supports do you all have in your settings? I'm gonna call on you. How about here? Like
Psychologists, we have contracts with outside counseling agencies like Erie Center, Bill Wilson Center, and they'll come on board like once a week.
Okay, so you have school psychologists, outside resources that you have that come in once a week. And that's great too, to have that community support as well. I know sometimes it's not listed in our people that are staff members, but buy-in from the community is so important because, you know, after school, where do the kids go? They're in the community at some level, the grocery stores, the restaurants, the everything in that source. So when you have students with behaviors or different special needs, if they're already connected to the community in one way by having the community members come into your site, that's also really important as well. What do others have? And the reason I think it's important to share out too is because we may be from different districts, so we can learn from others. Just like Andrea mentioned before, there's special ed and then there's general ed. I think that's the same can go for different districts, you know. It's like, okay, we're all in California, but then our district does this, our district does that, our district does that. So it's kind of great if we can, you know, share some resources, because it's not very often that we have this opportunity to be around others from different districts. Do you want to share?
We have an inclusion specialist, so we're at a private preschool, so it's a little bit different. We don't operate at the district level, but she puts us in contact with any of the outside providers that might be relevant, for the teachers and for the families.
Right, so an inclusion specialist that would be relevant for the teachers and the families. That's a great resource as well. So that's kind of what we are talking about when we're mentioning the social emotional support. So aside from the academic or environmental, we also want to touch on the behavior and mental health components as well when we're speaking of inclusion. And also training the staff in those areas. So here I'm going to discuss the role of PBIS. How many have PBIS going on in their campus at some level? Right, so you all should be pretty familiar. It's positive behavioral intervention and supports, and basically it's short for school-wide positive behavior supports. And the principles of applied behavior analysis are used, and so it's more of an approach that's more positive and preventative. And so you may be looking at ways to reinforce students for the different expected behaviors that you have outlined in your matrices throughout the school or throughout your classroom setting. So this is that type of a framework or approach for assisting school personnel in adopting and organizing evidence-based behavioral interventions into an integrated continuum that enhances academic and social behavior outcomes for all of the students. So this is something where you need a lot of buy-in, right? It takes a lot to get this program going, but there's good news. Once it gets going, it can operate very well, and you can have less behaviors. More people are feeling empowered to handle different situations within their classroom setting without always feeling like, okay, this is someone else, we need to take this student out and we need to place them here. But within this type of a framework, there's a lot of empowerment that goes on for the different staff members. So if you guys are already doing PBIS, I think that's great, and it's good to kind of keep up on that. If you're not, I encourage you to look into it and see how that can be implemented in your school setting. So as I mentioned, it's an evidence-based practice, and I just kind of wanted to give you an example for one of the students that Andrea and I both have, an inclusion student. She's actually right now in a kindergarten class, and she is kind of what they would say like hyper, or she's not always with the students. So we were trying to figure out what's some evidence-based things we can bring into the classroom so that the other 30 students may not be as affected by it or are more receptive to her and understand her better. And so some of the things we thought would be great is to outline the expectations of what is expected of her. And just like we mentioned before, it's great for all students. It's not just for this student. It would be especially helpful for her. But it is great, this evidence-based practice from the CHAMPS model is to provide what are the expectations you have for this student. If it's time to go to snack, what is the student supposed to do? How do you get from your seat to eating? What does that look like? And sometimes we may assume that they kind of already have a routine down maybe from preschool, or if it's a second or third grader, they've already done this before. But as we mentioned before, everyone has different expectations of how their classroom is ran. So it's really important that we break down for her exactly what the expectations were for her. And so using visuals to support her, and then above all of that, also for me to go out and model to the aide or extra classroom support that's working with her how to do that. And that comes along with the improving their implementation of the practices, is that it's great to go and tell the team, okay, this is what we're gonna do. We had a consultation meeting and we set up the notes and we sent them out, everyone knows, but it's a really great idea to come back maybe a week later after they've had a chance to kind of work out the kinks of trying to implement that practice and checking in on them to see maybe do they have any questions, was that effective, did it work, what is something that we can do differently? So for that student, it actually has been effective, and then she's been reinforced for those different behaviors and the expectations. But sometimes it doesn't always work, right? So it's not gonna always work, but I can tell you things are better than they were before, and that's our goal, is progress. And so speaking of progress, I know there we mentioned that we would discuss kind of progress monitoring as well, and that's a piece of it as well where you're going back and you're checking in with the staff to see how the student is doing, it's a really good idea to kind of jot down some data, a baseline of where the student is at, and then moving on from there when you check back with them to see how their progress or regress is occurring. And there is a frequently asked questions page. There's the website on there too, so it's a great resource if you want to check out their website for PBIS as well. So for the proactive classroom strategies, I did mention that we had the Dr. Andy Sprick's model. And so here is just a list of some of the items that he covers in his book, and that's across the next couple of slides. So shaping the behavior, motivation. Do you all know what motivates your students? What are some things that motivate your students? Having choices? How do you know that?
Well, because they're in many times environments that are directives, and at home, schedule is all over the place, there really isn't a routine. So just offering 2 to 3 choices.
2 or 3 choices.
And that delivers a sense of empowerment to the child.
Yes, I agree. That definitely delivers a sense of empowerment. Same thing with us. If we woke up every day and I said, this is your breakfast, you're going to eat cereal and you're going to have a banana every day. You're like, well, I get tired of that after a day or 2, 3 days. So having the choice, we also forget that things that we want, our students would like that as well, right? What are some other things here?
I think one thing that motivates a child and that we often forget about is just knowing that somebody cares for them in that classroom and making that personal connection with them.
That is an excellent point, and I have not heard that before as something that people find as motivating, but it's very true. Knowing that someone cares about them. How often do we do that in our day-to-day? Do we show that we care about the students that we have? Do they know that we care? Do we show it in a way that they can sense that? So it's important to take the time out to make sure we do that. I know that some schools started embedding a practice where they kind of greet the students at the door, right? So that's at the beginning of the class, and that's great, but we want to also do that for the next, if there's a 45-minute class, depending on if it's a middle school, but if it's an elementary setting or kinder setting, we want to make sure that we're not just doing that at the greeting, but we want to do that throughout and acknowledging their work as well. Did you have any other ones? What other things that motivate your students? What about over here? You guys have been kind of quiet.
We need to have a microphone
absolutely.
for the people online.
No problem.
They can't hear you.
No problem. Thanks.
Thank you.
What about here? I just pointed you all out. And you're like, what is she doing over here? What motivates your students?
My kids are motivated by rewards sometimes as well.
Right. So rewards, that's really good. And when we think about motivating students with rewards, the most important thing is to ask them, what do you like? Because we may think erasers are cool, pencils are cool, but in reality, they may think, well, I like the little spider gummy thing or whatever. So, it's like, it's great that we have ideas too, but it's not bad to check in with the students and ask, hey, maybe the first day of school, have them write down or to have a discussion if they're not writing yet, what it is they like, so that that's a part of their motivation. Because if you came to work every day and I said, I'm gonna pay you in pretzels, you're gonna be like, well, who told you I wanted pretzels, So we have to figure out what is motivating for each person. That varies. And then to move on to the next one, identifying classroom goals. That's important to do. Developing guidelines for success, positive expectations. Maintaining positive expectations, I did want to mention that even though we may have students that have behaviors or they may seem lower functioning, it's important that we still have positive expectations for those students as well, because they do have strengths. And so as the teachers or educators, administrators, we want to make sure that we're kind of keeping that positive outlook for them, and we maintain higher expectations, because we know that if you have lower expectations, they're going to rise to whatever that low expectation is, versus if you have a higher one, they're going to strive to reach that. So we want to make sure that we're also providing them with the positive expectations and letting them know that you think they can achieve it. You believe that they can do it. Also, instructional practices that are effective, initiating and maintaining family contact. Let me ask you, when is the last time you contacted a family? Raise your hand if it was within the last day. Great, great. Raise your hand if it was in the last week. Raise your hand if you have not talked to a parent within the last month, if you have not talked to a parent in the last month. So everyone's at least spoke with a parent or a family within the last month. Now let me ask you this. Raise your hand if you contacted the family on a positive note for something that their child did well. Okay, about 4 of you, 5 of you. Who contacted a parent because something was a questionable thing that their child did, or you're not really sure, or there's not communication, or something that was not positive? Right, okay. So some people didn't vote on the not positive because I had more people's hands up. But the point that I want to make is that it's important that we're contacting families regularly and consistently, and not just when their child is not doing something right. Because there are a lot of times when their child is doing something that can be achievable, that's hard for them, but they strive and they've done it, or they've made progress, or something is going well. So I encourage you to challenge yourself for the next month or two, maybe till winter, if maybe you can do that, is to contact the parents. I'm not saying all of the students, but maybe the students that you usually would contact for those, today he threw a rock, today he did this, like the one that you talk about in the teacher's lounge. I challenge you to contact that family a couple times before the year is out about something that their child did right. And what that does is that also kind of creates a rapport with you and the family, so that when it does come to a difficult point where you need to say, you know what, this isn't working, is there something we can do in the home that can change and something we can do in the school? It kind of helps out with that homeschool collaboration because they know that you care about their student. It's not just that teacher or administrator or specialist that's always calling me when my child does something wrong and they can't see the good in them. So I think that's a good thing to try to do. I know our district has the teachers do welcome letters when they're starting school, but also maybe something in the winter time, and then also something maybe towards spring, maybe just to kind of keep the teachers abreast to what you're going over in your classes, the materials the students are learning. He also talks about arranging an efficient daily schedule, which is really important, having the visuals up for the students so they can see what it is they're doing next. How many people have a calendar? Raise your hand if you have a calendar. If you have a calendar to tell you what you're going to do in the next 30 minutes. Does everyone have a calendar? Raise your hand if you do not have a calendar. So everyone has a calendar, right? Same thing with our kiddos. They need to know what's on their calendar. They need to know what's coming up next. So using a visual schedule for them is great. And this kind of minimizes some behaviors, because if you didn't know what you were doing next, you may be anxious, you may be nervous, anticipating what's coming. And so I think it's really good to think about that and making that aware for you to know that they need to also have a visual schedule of what they're supposed to be doing next. Creating a positive physical space in the classroom, using attention signals, determining how you're going to get your students' attention in between transitions, beginning and ending routines of activities. Also, the independent work periods and managing student assignments. Anytime a student's doing a task independent, I just think it's a good rule of thumb to make sure it's an assignment that they've already mastered, because otherwise, if they're working on something independently and they haven't learned it yet, they may become frustrated. And so you may also see some behaviors occur during that time. So it's great to teach them the knowledge that they need to know and do that in maybe a whole format setting when they're acquiring the knowledge. But then when they go into their independent work groups, they're doing something that either they know or they're familiar with. So that can kind of decrease behaviors as well. Determine the level of classroom structure, whether you want students, is it okay to kind of walk around, or is it everyone in their seat? Everyone's different. So you want to determine that, let the students know. Also display the classroom rules. Same way you would display the visual schedule as well, so they know what's expected. Correcting rule violations and being consistent about it. How do you all respond to appropriate behavior? How do you respond to appropriate behavior? Share out. Yes.
Feedback.
Positive feedback. Great. Positive feedback is how you respond to appropriate behavior. How do others respond to appropriate behavior? Ignore it. There you go. That is another way. If you're trying to put something on extinction, you ignore it. But do you want to extinguish appropriate behavior? You don't, right? And I think that's a really great answer, because when people are doing what they're supposed to be doing, they're not usually acknowledged. It's when they're doing something wrong is when they're acknowledged. So we want to make sure, if you kind of flip your mindset a little bit, it's going to be kind of hard, but kind of think of it that way, is that you want to put more attention on the appropriate behaviors, not the inappropriate behaviors, because what happens is when we put more attention on the inappropriate behaviors, they happen more often. So we want to make sure that we're tuning into those appropriate behaviors.
We have a virtual person here who says, many of us have contacted our parents regarding positive things.
Yes. Good job. I like that. I like that answer. That is so good. How do you respond to inappropriate behaviors when you're trying to correct a rule violation? If it's inappropriate, what do you do? What was that?
It depends on the child and the situation. So.
Let's see. We'll give you the mic. Give you some chance to speak. Don't be shy.
Oh, I'm not sure. It's just, there is no one way. It's what happened and what would be effective for that child.
So give me an example of within the last week or month of how you corrected a rule violation. What happened? Bring me into your classroom.
I don't have a classroom
Or into
right
your
now
into the
in my environment.
Okay, you want to hear right here?
I can give an example. As a coach in the county, I work with many teachers on these kinds of strategies. And last week I observed a teacher, fantastic teacher, but caught up in the emotion of many children speaking out of turn during group activities, large group activity, and the teacher automatically said, "No talking." And so, it just went off. And so what we coached about was, instead of focusing on what the child did that wasn't appropriate in the teacher's eyes, focus on, wow, you have a lot to say. I'm really excited about your thoughts right now. Hold on. Let's get back to you because I want to hear what you have to say, instead of the no talking. So watering what you want to see grow was the focus.
I like that. Watering what you want to see grow. I'm all about quotes. I have this huge quote book, so I'm going to put that in there. I think that's really important to kind of channel that energy. That's another great point. The students do have the energy, but once again, they don't know where to put it. So that's our role, is to mold that for them, right? And we don't want to shut them down by saying this is like no talking, like you mentioned. We want to make sure that we're just channeling that to where it needs to be. Thank you for sharing. Here.
I was just going to say it's important to have developmentally appropriate expectations for your kids. Not only have expectations for your classroom, but are they at the right age and stage for the kids you're working with. So if I've been talking in didactic instruction for the last like 15, 20 minutes, I can't expect all my kids in kindergarten to be sitting that long without getting up and moving. So I think that, having expectations of making sure that they're developmentally appropriate for your group and size is really also important.
I think I say that at almost every consultation. Like, I'm not even kidding. Andrea can attest to it. We need to make sure that we have realistic expectations. That's what I let the teams know. Even though we have so much we want to teach them, if you sit them there for 30 minutes, they might have gotten 5 minutes of it, versus if you sit them there for 10 minutes and another 10 minutes and another 10 minutes, then they might got 5, 10, 15 minutes of it. So we have to think about that. But it's just a matter of just teaching, right? And letting the teams know, hey, I learned this, so maybe you can bring that back. Hey, guess what? I learned something. Do you want to try it? And kind of see how they respond. Thank you for sharing that. So establishing corrective consequences for rule violations, know when and when not, and when not to use disciplinary referral. We want to kind of reserve that. A lot of times when students engage in inappropriate behaviors, they are teaching moments. It's not a time to say, okay, you did something wrong, even though you didn't know what you were supposed to do, you're still going to go to the office. We need to be careful in making sure that, I think she has something here, just making sure that we have taught them what's expected. And if they are having trouble with it, or if many students are having trouble with it, that's kind of a sign to us, maybe I should reteach that. That's an opportunity for me to reteach it, rather than saying, okay, you need to go to the office. If half of your class is in the office every week, I don't know if it's the kids. It might be the user. Like, that happens to me too. Go ahead. Yeah, I think it's on.
And to further that, and what Jennifer said, is at every moment when those behavioral challenges and emotional needs are happening, for the teacher to be reflecting on what need does this child have that's not being met, as the overarching question that can change from day to day, or moment to moment, but to always go back there. What need does this child have that's not being met?
That's a very good point as well. Thank you for sharing that. We need to also make sure that we are considering that too. So CHAMPS, this is the acronym, and it's spelled out. This is basically Dr. Annie Sprick's model for having your class engage in any activity or any transition. You would outline CHAMPS before they are expected to engage in it. So the C is for conversation, you're gonna determine. So let me just give you an example. I'm gonna have everyone go into centers, right? So your first graders are gonna do centers. Before you move, so I'm just kind of playing teacher, right? Before you move, I'm gonna have you look and see what are we supposed to do. For conversation, I need you at a 0. For this particular activity, 0, and they would already have learned what 0, 1, 2, and 3 voice levels may be, or at a whisper, number 1, and then that lets me know that you're listening to me for the conversation. For H, help. If you need help, the way you need help to show me that, you're gonna raise your hand. You're gonna raise your hand, that's how I know you need help. A, activity. The activity is that I'm gonna have you work on filling in sentences. There's a blank, fill in the blanks. M for movement. Can students move about? If you need to get up to get a drink of water, if you need to go to the restroom, you are allowed to do so. You do not need to raise your hand before telling me that, okay? P, participation. What does the expected student behavior look and sound like? The way I know that you're participating is that you have your pencil in your hand, you have your paper on the desk, and you're writing. That's how I know that you're participating. And then S is for success, and that's for the teacher to know, how are you going to reinforce the student? Because every single activity or every transition, anything they do, they get reinforced for it. When you clock in to go to work, everything you do from the moment you clock in, you get paid for, right? Is anyone clocking in and not getting paid? No one's doing that. Same thing with the kids. When they come into school, they need to be reinforced for everything they're doing. So this is the kind of model that he uses for each activity, or if it's a transition from the classroom to the library. This is the conversation level, transitioning. You can be at a 1. If you want to whisper, you can do that if you need help. So same thing. This is how he does it. You can modify it for your class. It doesn't have to say CHAMPS, but you can choose a cool acronym that fits your students, but at least kind of embedding this information so they know what the expectations are. So now we're gonna move on to the different roles that I had mentioned before. So you have the school psychologist, which I talked about, and you guys mentioned some said they do have that on their sites. You have the education intervention specialist, autism program managers, and then education-related mental health services. So that's kind of what I'm gonna move into to talk about now. So for school psychologists, and there's a couple slides here showing how they work with students, how they work with students and their families, how they work with teachers, and then how they work with administrators. So all 4 slides are kind of detailed in how they do work with them. And you can feel free to go through. I'm just going to touch on a couple of the points. But providing counseling. School psychologists are trained to provide counseling. If you have a school psychologist on your campus and you notice that a student is struggling and they need that support, feel free to contact them and see if they can provide counseling for them if they have time in their schedule. Hopefully they do. Also, mentoring for those struggling with social, emotional, and behavioral problems. I think that's very important to create like a mentoring system. So once again, this is inclusion. They need help in the social emotional category. This is a go-to page for you to see what kind of resources you can get. Also promoting wellness and resilience by reinforcing communication and social skills. So if we know a student has issues with anger management or social skills or anything like that, we want to make sure that we're helping them through those processes. And you can pull your school psych in to maybe help you with some social stories or different resources to help support that as well. Working with the families portion, this is important, the second bullet point, evaluating eligibility for special ed services. So if it comes to the point where, at this point, if they're in inclusion, they probably have an IEP at this point. So we want to make sure that we have the parent included on the team. So decisions shouldn't be made without the parent. They should be made with the parent, and they know the student the best because it's their kid. They usually do. So it's great to make sure that if you're changing their eligibility or if you have questions about that, that the parent is considered an equal partner on the team. Also, teaching parenting skills. We do have someone in our sites, too, that helps out with that. Some of the parents may have trouble with their students at home. If they're having trouble in your classroom, they're probably having trouble at home. So helping them with the parenting skills is great. Providing them with resources on the regular is also a good idea. Sometimes I see teachers photocopy different resources for the month, and it may apply to some parents, maybe not all, but rotating each month what resource they're going to send home. Also working with the teachers. When the school psych is working with the teachers, they're trying to figure out what are the barriers to learning that this student is having. And so that's a time where they can collaborate and figure that out, and based on that, they can come up with different solutions. Supportive, effective, individualized instruction is a great one. Motivating students, we talked about that as well. And then also for the administrators. So I know we mentioned there's some administrators in the room here. So the way administrators can collaborate with school psychologists is looking at the data. So looking at student outcomes, how's the data looking? How many referrals are being sent to the office? And how many students are in crises, different things like that. So that's a great team time for the administrators and the school psychologists to look at that and see where the need is for that site. Also, designing, implementing, and garner support for comprehensive school mental health programming. Like I mentioned, now we're providing mental health back into the school system, so we want to make sure that administrators and school psychologists are on the same page with that and figuring about how are we going to do this? What is our plan? And there's other information on there as well. Now, working with the community, I know you mentioned that you do have the community members come in, so school psychologists can also do that as well. So coordinating the delivery of services to students and their families in and outside of school, and then helping students transition to and from school and community learning environments, such as residential treatment. So sometimes we do have students that may be severe and they're in a residential facility, so we want to figure out how are we communicating with them. The school psychologist can go out and make sure that all the services are taken care of there, and if there's questions about support or something that the facility needs, the school psychologist can help out with that, as well as juvenile justice programs. So education intervention specialist, this is what I do. It's a very new role. So basically what I do is I go out and I consult with teams if they have students with behavioral issues. And so based on what I observe, I kind of come back with the team and come up with different strategies for them and have them implement it, and then I go back out and see how it's working. And if it's not, we change it. And then if we see that it's deemed necessary that a behavior intervention plan or a functional behavior assessment needs to be done, then I will conduct that with the team and then we'll move forward. So this gives the team the opportunity to brainstorm strategies, learn of new behavioral interventions that they may not have known of, and also just another set of eyes from the outside. Autism program managers and behavior interventionists. So there's behavior interventionists that we kind of consider like aides, you would probably say, but they work directly one-on-one or sometimes in a larger classroom setting, usually one-on-one though, with students with autism. And so they actually are getting the programming from the autism program managers. So they let the team know exactly what they should be working on, basically telling the BI, okay, these are the programs we're going to be implementing. And so they kind of do what I do for the students with autism. They come back in and they check to see if it's effective, and then they have the meetings as well. They're also, the autism program managers are also a part of the IEP meetings and things like that too. And then the education-related mental health services. I mentioned before that we do have mental health services being provided in the school districts again. So this is the law and whatnot that kind of talks to that. So we do have, they are actually school psychologists, and then also there's a marriage and family therapist that comes out to our more high intense programs, mental health programs. So like maybe what you have heard of as like an ED program, we have behavior support programs. So our specialists are out at the behavior support programs on site so that if something is needed, they can be accessed. And they're also heavily involved in the IEP processes as well. And then here, this can include, I was just listing out social work services, psychological services, behavior, day treatment, health and nursing. So these are the different mental health components that go into that. And then Andrea is going to discuss the environmental supports.
And I want to remind you, don't speak until you have the microphone. Because people online are not hearing you, and they want to hear you.
Okay, so Ashley just went over the social emotional, and just to reiterate, everything that we have in place and everything that she discussed, all of this makes for a successful inclusion program. You have to have all these different components for it to be successful. If you don't meet their social needs, then you can't meet their academic needs. So it's important just to see how it all works together. And inclusion, all of us are, I think I'm preaching to the choir, everybody is on board for it here for the most part. But you know, we all know what we need to do. It's just a matter of getting all the right supports in place. And we all know why it's important to have inclusion, and we know about some of the social emotional supports that need to be in place, but you need to figure out, okay, how are we going to do that? So in regards to environmental supports, you have local experts for this too. Our occupational therapists in our district, they actually are going to be doing a PD, I believe, on November 6th for general education teachers and giving them some different strategies on things that they can implement in their classroom, not just for their students that are on IEPs, but once again for all students. Occupational therapists are amazing. Is there an occupational therapist in the room? Anybody in occupational therapy? Who agrees that OTs are amazing? Right? Okay. They have the best ideas and resources. I've learned so much from working with the different OTs in our school district that now I can go into classrooms and I can consult with a few little OT corrections, but I wouldn't know that unless I worked with an OT. Something as simple as I went into a classroom the other day and one of our little fully included guys, he was struggling to do his work at the table. The table's like up to here and he's like trying to write. And so an OT would go in there and be like, you need to lower your tables. That's a simple correction, but unless you're seeing it through that OT lens, you wouldn't know that otherwise. A gen ed teacher isn't gonna necessarily know that that's gonna affect his fine motor significantly and his behavior too, because he wasn't able to actually do the task. But just simple things like tables being lowered, using the golf pencils instead of those big pencils for kindergartners. I remember one of the OTs described it to me as, imagine, you know those giant pencils that you can get, I don't know, at the fair or something. That it's the equivalent to giving an adult one of those pencils and telling you, okay, go ahead and write your notes for the day, when you give the kids those huge pencils. So even something like that, and giving them broken crayons to use, just things that they can manipulate easier because their hands are still developing and all those little muscles, they need to practice those skills. And we are forcing them to write a lot earlier than they should be. But I mean, that's part of Common Core right now, but how can we facilitate that and give them tools that they can actually manage? So OTs have, great resources. We've had OTs that have actually written up a curriculum for movement breaks in the classroom that can be done throughout the day depending on the different types of input that those kids need. I don't know if you guys have heard like the Dragon song is one of them that our OTs will come in and do. We have brain breaks posted on our Haiku site once again. A lot of those are recommended by OTs. And they'll come in and they'll teach the teacher how to implement those, and then also how to implement different, they're kind of like yoga postures, I guess, but like bear walks and things like that, that help the students to regain focus and just help them to function in the daily classroom activities. So OTs are great resources, physical therapists are great resources, in helping with some of those environmental supports to be in place for students. And then also just showing visuals to teachers of classrooms that are organized well. I don't know how you guys are, but I'm like really OCD on things. So when I go into my house and if it's not clean, I have a hard time getting anything done until I clean it. So I will take hours to get everything organized the way that I want it, and then I can sit down to actually do what I intended to originally do. And I can't imagine what it's like for some of our students that go into these classrooms. We already know that there's a lot of kids in there, but to go in there and there'd be, all these things stacked on a table, different visuals up all over the wall. You can't even walk around some of the tables. There are ways to set up the classroom so that it is more visually pleasing for students and it is easier for them to navigate their room. It's just a matter of, looking at different ideas, going and seeing other teachers' classrooms. So I try to share that information with teachers when I consult with them. And we provide pictures for them to look at. I know it's hard to organize your classroom because you start stockpiling things, but it really is important to design that learning environment for the kids. So when we talk about environmental supports, we have these questions to consider. So is a schedule, I consider that environmental too. It's social, emotional, it's academic, and it's environmental. Is the schedule clearly posted and visual supports in the classroom? Are students with disabilities seated in a place that is most conducive to learning for their individual needs? That's important because I hear that accommodation a lot about sitting near the front of the classroom as an accommodation, just like a go-to sometimes, but for some students, that's not the best place for them to be sitting. So you really need to consider the individual needs of that student as to where their proximity to the teacher should be, their proximity to the board, and how that impacts them. Is there an area of the room designated for a student to take a sensory break with a sensory box or tub nearby? And now in our gen ed classrooms, there's not a lot of room to do that, but we can put a sensory tub that has some like therapy in it. We'll put little beads in there that the student can go just kind of decompress with that. So just having access to different things in the gen ed classroom, it is possible to implement some of those things that you typically would see in an SDC room. Is the environment overly stimulating? Can students easily navigate through the room? Are student materials located in an easily accessed location? That's also important if you have paraprofessionals in your classroom, because it's awful if you're teaching and a para has to come up and ask you where something is because they can't find it. So having things labeled and put in places where people can access it. And then to make sure that things like games and toys aren't within students' reach, because they will find it and they will take it out and start playing with it. I've gone into classrooms before where they've had puzzles and things like low on the ground, and students were supposed to be reading a book, but then that toy is right there, so you see them grab the toy and start playing with the toy. So it's all about how you set up your environment. Accessibility, administrators need to be aware of this too, because they're the ones that are giving the feedback to teachers when they do their walkthroughs in classrooms, and they need to understand just accessibility school-wide. And then information needs to be distributed to administrators, educators, and all staff. So in an attempt to do this, we provide administrators with a checklist that they can use. I call it the checklist. It's your handout number 4. It's a UDL checklist. And it has all of the different components on there, the academic, social, emotional, and environmental. And we share it with our site administrators anytime that we can. So at some of those district level meetings, we share it. When we have a one-on-one meeting with them, we share it. I've sent it out in emails. I've posted it on the website. I'll take it to consultation meetings and refer to it. So you guys have access to that. Of course, you can adjust it to meet the needs of your school sites. But like I said, it's important to emphasize that everything on that checklist is to benefit all students, not just students with disabilities. And for teachers to really understand that they're implementing these things for all of their students to be successful and to access their curriculum. So you guys can take a look at that. It's a good resource. I took a lot of information from the UDL. Have you guys used CAST? Have you guys accessed that, cast.org? That has a lot of good visuals on it too for a checklist. Okay, so Ashley's actually going to talk about consultation now.
Can I go back to environment?
Oh.
You can just repeat it. You wanted to go back to environment.
Oh, you want? Oh, I wasn't sure.
Oh, she wants to say something?
Yeah. Okay. There you go. I think so.
Okay, so you mentioned environment, but I think that there's not enough discussion around what does environment look like. When I go into a classroom and I see an overabundance of the primary colors being utilized, and I go back to then what is a similarity between every fast food restaurant? Reds, yellows, and blues. Yet when we go around and look in these classrooms, that's a lot of the predominating colors that we see at the children's level all day long. And those are high stimuli colors. And so what does color do to the neurological development of children that are overexposed to those loud colors, and then versus the natural settings that have more of the earth tones? And cartoon prompts versus real face prompts too, and how that can also help children connect with emotions and that social emotional development.
Yeah, those are some excellent points. We actually, when we go into classrooms, those are some excellent points. When we go into classrooms, we will actually talk about certain things like that, about even lighting too, because a lot of the lighting is like this. So sometimes for some students, it's better to have just a lamp turned on in the classroom and all of the lights off. I prefer that actually as a teaching, because the lights get to me as well. But also just understanding that different sounds can affect students, and just knowing all those different aspects, like you were talking about color, it can be overwhelming to a lot of the students. So that's an excellent point.
So I'm just going to wrap up with the consultation piece, and I want to leave a little bit more time for the questions, so I'm going to kind of breeze through it a bit. But just understanding that it's important to build effective consultation relationships so that we can facilitate these interventions and the development of them. So the process, developing the relationships is step one. So you think, how am I going to develop a relationship with the teacher or whoever it is that you need to consult with? Also maintaining communication, whether that's through email. Sometimes email is not the best way. Some people, you need to just show up in the classroom and, hey, I emailed you, so you might want to consider that. Problem solve as a team, making sure you get those meetings ahead of time on the schedule, and then assessing whether or not what you put in place is effective. So this is just a quote kind of talking about developing relationships and knowing that it's important to provide a space for teachers to reflect on their practice, and making sure that we value that information as well that they bring to the table. And then here I have some information about instructional consultation and instructional consultation teams. So the components of it, the relationship between the consultant and the consultee, based in part on effective communication skills, the stages of problem solving. So are you at identifying the problem, analyzing the problem, developing a plan to help solve the problem, and then the assessment and intervention strategies to address it. So also here, there's important stages when you're trying to create this consultation team or collaboration. So there's the entry point that I mentioned and the contracting, identifying the problem, analyzing it, designing the intervention, and then implementing it effectively and with fidelity, and then closure where you can determine the effectiveness of it. I like this the most here. When we are consulting, it's important to think of the instructional triangle. So you want to consider the student, right? Who is our student? What is their need? What makes them unique? What is their instructional level? Where are they at? And then the task. What are you asking them to do? Is it within their instructional level that meets their need? So then you have the match, and that equals success. So if you're giving the same tasks to every single student, or you have the same exact expectation for every single student, we probably want to differentiate that a bit, because not all students are at the same instructional level or behavioral level or things like that, or their goals are different, and not all students are the same. So when we do go into consultation meetings, it's great to kind of, if you need to bring this with you, just to kind of say, okay, let's put this on the table, and you can kind of write out next to the lines of what it is you guys are going to come up with, and make sure at the end it matches, and most likely it'll be successful. So just to end, there is an activity. The last part is the right side of that column you filled out before. So please write in at least 3 supports that your school district organization or even you individually can put into place to facilitate inclusive education starting Monday. So I'll go ahead and give you a couple moments to kind of think about that. And while you guys are filling that out, do you guys have any questions or questions from the individuals? Okay, great. Go for it. While you guys are filling that out, we can answer. Oh, that's right, to each person.
Every person has to see the microphone. They don't hear us. Okay, can you, is this on?
I think so.
Can you remind us what
Okay.
county you're from?
We're from Orange County, Southern California.
Mm-hmm.
So in Tustin, it's near Irvine, near UCI. Most people know UCI, or Disneyland. We're right next to Mickey and Minnie.
All right. And number 2, can we have copies of the books, resources, and lessons that promote disability awareness?
I can provide a link for that on the Edmodo site.
Great. So you're going to provide that on the Edmodo site. Good. Can you show us the website with information about academic support again?
Oh,
They didn't catch that.
was it in here? Let me see. Sorry.
I think it was CAST.
Yeah,
Yes.
cast.
It's cast.org.
Cast.org, CAST.org. Is that right?
Yes, it has
Okay.
information on universal design for learning.
Okay.
Oh, that one, okay.
And number 4, can you speak more about haiku information?
Haiku. So haiku, it's
haiku.
Yeah, haiku.
I
Yeah,
was wondering, what's this haiku?
it's the. Let me just show you.
Yeah, everybody's asked about that.
It's a platform. Yeah, it's not. It's what our district uses. So it's not. You could really use any platform to disseminate
That's just the one
information.
we use.
It's just the one that I put all of our information on. I'll log in and show you so that you can see what it looks like and provide similar resources. I know a lot of districts are going, how many of you guys are really into tech right now? Everybody's going that route. I think the Q conference is going on in Napa right now. So anyways, trying to put everything online for people to access is really important, just because you can put videos online, you can do screencasts, you can put links to blogs, just a lot of different information can be put online.
Oh, that's cool.
So you have a login, and it's also set up through Google. See if it'll let me log in. And our school district uses this because people can have different classes and then put all of their information on their own site. So I run the Inclusive Schooling website. And then all of the different resources, I try to update it weekly. It's been really busy lately, so I haven't been able to. But a lot of the information, it's all there from last year as well. So I'll put up links to different videos, classroom management resources, resources for paraprofessional management. So if I have documents that I've used before or other people have used, I'll put those on the site for teachers to access. Inspiration, so there's different videos you can put up there. We do Reader's Workshop, like I said, so I'll put up Reader's Workshop resources, particularly on differentiating Reader's Workshop. Also the OT Corner, one of our OTs actually created different articles on, one was on learning and sensory processing, lines formation and spacing. I think she did another one on ergonomics, and so I posted that all on the site too, or I included it in a newsletter. So basically any resource that I had as a teacher, I tried to put it on a website to share with others, then anything, excuse me, that I came across, I would also put on the website. The other nice thing, and you can do this with other sites as well, I can check to see who's accessed it, so I know who's actually gone on and used the resources, which is helpful, because then I can refer people. So I can check that in my, over in my stats, so then I can know who was on the site and what parts they accessed. That's just helpful information for me as I'm looking to see who's actually used resources.
I have a question. So how did you get your district to hire a coach and an inclusion and an intervention specialist? Because money is always an object, right?
Our assistant superintendent really wanted to go with this inclusion thing, and she knew that certain supports had to be in place, so she really pushed for it. So it's really all on her.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
No,
Oh,
stop,
wait.
Oh.
Oh.
So I'm just curious, how many, down in Southern Cal, how many inclusive preschool programs do you have going on?
Right now, we're actually trying to transfer ours to an inclusive preschool. We're in the process of that. I know that Irvine Unified has a pretty good inclusive preschool, but I think that they're pretty much the only one that's doing that really well right now. The rest of us are trying to move that way. I know Santa Ana's also trying to move that way. So we're just trying to work that out, because there's a lot of different things that you have to figure out with that.
You have to have a lot of things in place to get that.
Yeah, we have a situation up here. I think we're getting there with the Inclusive Collaborative, where there are more inclusive preschool classrooms as opposed to 10 years ago. Yeah. But I was just wondering, would you say you have more SDC programs still going on down there, or do you have more inclusive preschools? I worked at Cal State Fullerton before, so I think it's
still more
curious to see how you guys are doing.
at the preschool level. But in the elementary level, we're working more towards inclusion. So we already, I'm trying to think how many SDC classes we collapsed last year. It was at least around 5 to 10 that we collapsed in the district, if not more. And then this next year, we'll collapse even more classes.
Okay. And lastly, our greatest challenge here is, of course, getting administrator support. So that has to happen first before anything occurs. Right. So do you have any, how do you go about getting your administrators to change? And what do you do as change agents to kind of promote that philosophy and make that change? Because that, to me, is our challenge up in Northern California.
We both meet with them quite frequently. They know us pretty well. And we try to make ourselves very visible on their campuses. Having been a classroom teacher, I know it's really difficult to have someone give you feedback when they're not in your classroom. So I took that idea, and when I started in this position, I made it a point to spend a lot of time in those classrooms, hours in those classrooms. And so the admin, and same with Ashley, she has spent hours in a lot of classrooms too. The administrators know that we're in those classrooms a lot, so we've developed rapport with them. And so that's really helped, just because they know that we're there to support the teachers and the kids, and they know that we're definitely on the same page as them. I don't know, did you have any other suggestions?
In addition to that, what I've seen that's been effective too, other than being visible, which is very important, is data. So I come in and day one, I'm like, what's the baseline? Because by day 15, I want to make sure that we're showing some kind of progress in some way, form, or fashion for the student, if they're in an inclusion program, to show this can work. So that speaks, I think, a lot to them making decisions if they see something visibly changing. And then having that consistent communication, just like with families, like I was encouraging before. I check in every week, every Friday, like even today it's on my calendar to set up next week's observations or check-ins, even if it's just like, hey, you guys are having a play. I even just emailed a teacher right now because one of our behavior support programs, the kids are going to be doing a play. And so, yes, I'm there when there is an intense behavioral episode, but I also want to be visible when they're doing a play and show the support that I am there to see them through all of the different ins and outs. So I think that's also really good with the buy-in.
So you're actually collecting data on developmental outcomes?
Yes.
So with special needs and gen ed.
They're collecting
Yes.
data.
Yes.
Because they understand data. We know that
Yes.
for principals. So
We make sure we do that. Are there other questions? We have.
I
a few
have
more
another
minutes.
question
Oh,
here. Can you explain more about the instructional triangle? How do you know when there is a match between the 3 points?
A good way to know if there is a match is to figure out if the student is still getting as frustrated behaviorally as they were before, or also to see the progress. So to see if they're able to start doing some of the work independently, or are they able to do more of the work with the teacher's support or someone else's support, versus just comparing it to what they were doing before. If you notice they weren't doing any of it, you can kind of adjust to see how they're doing that way. So it's not going to be a perfect match the first time you meet up, but at least being aware of the needs of that student is trying to get your wheels turning to know that it's not going to be a cookie cutter intervention or a cookie cutter task that you're asking them to do. It needs to be individualized to them. Yeah.
Are there any other questions? How many school sites?
I am open to be at every school site. So I think that's like maybe 30 approximately. So, but in rotation right now that are active, I would say I probably hit at least 9 to 10 a week. Yeah, for sure. And then at that school, you go to different classrooms. So like I have a certain school I go to, and I probably visit 3 to 4 different teachers when I'm at that school site. So I try to put those all on a Monday or a Tuesday. So I just kind of go back to back, and then I'm off to the next site. But our district is from the farthest point to the next point is probably 10 minutes, 15 minutes. So no matter if I'm going from this farthest school to this one, it's not like a huge drive. But I'm familiar with, so if I went to like principals meetings or anything like that, I would know most or half of them, because I'm so visible throughout, yeah. But there's another person that does what I do too. Right. And she works at the high school and middle school, and I work at the elementary and middle school. So we cover some middle school, but at any point, we both can do all levels. So like last year, I did elementary, middle, high, and preschool, so.
I do 17 elementary schools.
Yeah.
And I have 3 schools that I'm coordinator for too. Because I do the IEPs for our high-profile families, and I work with the special day classes at those sites too. But for the 17 elementary schools that I go to, I work mainly with the RSP teachers, and I use Google Docs to manage a schedule with them so that I'm checking in with them constantly. So they'll sign up for times when I can meet with them and consult with them at their site, and then go to the classrooms, and we'll visit the classrooms together so that we can share ideas, because it's easier to share ideas with somebody while you're observing and then to share that with the team at the site so that everybody's involved in that process. But we're busy, so.
Yeah, it's a lot of time management, because you do an observation and then you do a consultation. Yeah. So you have to make sure you're flip-flopping between those. So, oh yeah.
As you look into expanding into the preschools, what preschool programs are you looking at when you're determining who to partner with? Mm-hmm. Is it community preschools, like private preschools, Head Start?
We have that.
And do they share sites with your other preschools, your SDC classes?
We're trying to work that out right now. We do have other preschools that are on site at our school sites, so it'd be ideal to work with those, because we have, and they're not private preschools. They're through, and it's not Head Start either. It's they're just and so we have those at different sites. So we're trying to figure out a way to work those out together, but it's all within the licensing, so trying to get that figured out. And I know that our preschool coordinator has been working on that, and there's a group down, I think Dylan Henry, she's been kind of been organizing that and helping that too down in Orange County. So we're trying, it's just figuring out all those different licenses, but we're trying to partner with what we already have in place in our district.
Any other questions?
You have 30 seconds. Anything else?
I have a random question.
Oh, Mike.
I'm just curious, was this all a cost savings for your districts at all in terms of taking it to this model? Because I think when we talk to superintendents, we need to think about the financial aspect of doing this. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, so actually it has saved us money because they added my position, but we kept all of our SDC teachers. We just put them into either SAI positions or they moved into a different special ed position within the district. But we're also keeping kids at their home schools, so that's saving in transportation costs.
Go ahead.
It's just moving your resources around more too. So it did come out that we are saving money. I know that our assistant superintendent shared that information with the cabinet in our school district. So I think as we go further along, it's going to be saving more and more money. But we're not doing it to save money, but just to clarify that too. It is because just to see the growth that the students have made that started in the inclusion program last year in kindergarten that are now in first grade, it's pretty amazing. I have a little one with Down syndrome, and to see her, and she has aid support, but the aid actually has to step back because she's fine initiating on her own, and she'll do writer's workshop with the rest of the class. She'll get out her materials on her own. She references her peers. She's made such huge progress that she would not have done that in an SDC class. And that also goes for a lot of other students that we have in that environment. To walk into classrooms and to not be able to pick them out, that's pretty amazing. So especially because some of them had a lot of behaviors last year that Ashley dealt with, but to see that growth, that makes it
I was
worth
just
it.
going to add to that in the saving money element is that when I'm going out and consulting with teachers, this is empowering them so that they don't need or feel that they need to have an aid for every kid that is included. So that saves a lot of money there. It's like you don't need 3 aides in your class just because these 3 students may have extra needs. Let me help you figure out how to embed this within your whole class program. So in that instance, I think it has saved a lot of money when you look at it from that standpoint too. But it's good for the teachers to feel empowered and to learn of the strategies, because otherwise you just pull someone else in that already has that skill set, but then that teacher still hasn't learned that skill set. So it's kind of building their skill sets and their expertise and empowering them and supporting them through the process when it's difficult.
Because we know that's not the last kid.
Yeah, there's going to be another Johnny next year, I promise you. So we need to figure it out from the foundational level.